Thanks for tuning in to the Just Go Play podcast, where we look to develop and promote a positive youth sports experience. As always, we are available for speaking and private engagements and can be reached at info@justgoplay.ca. You can also catch full video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit us at justgoplay.ca. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Coach D here, Daryl Devenish. Welcome to the Just Go Play podcast. Listen, I'm here with Elisa, and today I'm so excited because I got my childhood friend on. And not only is my childhood friend, he's working with the NHL. He's one of the executives, and his focus is on youth hockey. We're here with Rob Knesaurek. Yes, Robbie K is in the house. How you doing, Robbie?
I'm living large after that intro. I'm doing okay.
No, you should be. Listen, let's get the ball rolling. Let's let the audience know a little bit about your backstory, just so they understand your journey and why you're at the front of the room. And it's an amazing one. So can you give us a little bit of background, just so a little bit of light, so people understand like why you're in the position you're in and why you're doing it. Like, listen, your story should be a movie.
Yeah. Well, if I didn't have mentors like you, I probably wouldn't be here, and I'm true and serious about that. So, a little about me that might not be obvious, but I will share anyway. So, I grew up with Daryl, very close to Daryl, in a place called Flemington Park in Toronto. Very humble beginnings, lots of love, not much money.
Yeah.
And my parents are both immigrants, like Daryl's are. My father is Croatian, and my mother's Jamaican. So I have a unique lens of having a black mother but looking white, and some of these issues that exist in society right now, I can tell you and endorse that they're real, because I almost feel like I was incognito for many years, and people would say ignorant things and just be unaware of my background and my makeup. So. I'm going to give you my background a little bit, and I'll make it condensed. I owe everything to hockey. I owe everything to sport. I was a better soccer player, actually, than I was a hockey player, but hockey seemed to grab me quickly. I started playing at a late age for Daryl. I followed your brother to a tryout at Don Mills Arena. It still exists. I think it's about to collapse. But I just loved it so much, and I think all of a sudden I'm in Don Mills House League, and then a few years later I'm playing for the Marlies, and I'm fortunate enough to be the captain. And then all of a sudden it just expedites. It happens so fast that I'm playing for the Oshawa Generals, and then I'm getting tryouts, and had a short kind of stint at minor pro, and then eventually ended up going back to school a little bit later, knowing that was going to be an important part of my life, education. Played at the University of New Brunswick. And, I profess that my greatest asset is my connection to people and finding the smartest people in the room, which I'm often not. And all the success I've had in business, I worked in healthcare for about 18 years. I was a CEO of a big healthcare company in Australia. I lived in Hong Kong, the US, Canada. And there was this point in life when I was just like, is this the rest of my life? And is this what I want to do? And my wife had a wonderful opportunity to move back to Canada and take a senior role on with an accounting firm. And I had to part ways with my healthcare company. And they were very generous, and it was very meaningful. But I didn't know, I was lost. I was lost a little bit. And it brought me back to hockey. So I started training kids for free. I just started getting on the ice with 3 kids and just completely did it out of the essence of fun. Everything in my recipe and formula started with, how am I going to make them smile and inject some work and good habits? And I used to tell the parents this, and I prop myself up as an example. And so that 3 kids on Thursday morning, I'll never forget this, turned into 30 kids. Someone said, hey, can you take that theory of change and apply it to a team? And 30 kids became 300 kids. And then, Daryl, I had you do some work with us, and we had 3,000 kids.
Great experience, man.
So in all that, I was able to kind of manifest these relationships with the NHL and the Players Association, to the point where they said, the work that you're doing in this environment should translate to a role we have, which is a senior role, really looking at how we get new fans. And we're going to hedge that our new fans are going to come from kids and their families. So there's the theory from Harvard that for every child you get in hockey, you get 3 new fans. You get parents, siblings, grandparents, right? So the NHL took a concerted effort to say, how do we pay attention to kids, foster them early for change, help accelerate their experience in this ecosystem, and ultimately try and build some new fans as a result. So that's my role at the NHL. I describe it like this. I'm either acquiring or retaining people playing, physically playing, watching, and watching has some breadth too. Watching isn't just watching a game on TV. Watching is actually esports. Watching could be a variety of things. And then supporting, because our game is made up of 90% volunteers. And at times we forget about those people that put endless amounts of time and effort to make sure our kids have a wonderful experience, and we treat them like a poo-poo. I won't use the other word on a podcast, but we treat them poorly. And like if we lose volunteers, we lose a lot. So that is my role, and we're having some impact, and we're learning lots, we're failing, we're having success. So it's a myriad of emotions, but I love having a chance to work with Gary and Bill and Kim and build something out.
Wow, dude, that is great. You're modest though, because I've been living in this country. I never got the chance to leave like you. You came back. I was trying to grow hockey here with kids in school. You came back and you turned 3 into 300 in no time. And it was the first time, Rob, I just want to say this before to add to your story, it's the first time I saw kids at a high level having fun in practice, but also working hard, which was like, wait a minute, these guys, it's, AA, AAA guys are like working hard, but they're having fun. And you were good at mixing that. And it was one of the things that I really took, and I started saying, hey, that's how my training sessions got to be. If I'm working with a team, got to focus on the fun and the fundamentals. You always talk about the brilliant basics. And I don't know if, I quote you all the time on the brilliant basics and the fundamentals. And people are like, dude, you always say that. Yes, it doesn't change. So let's get down to it, man. Let's change up the speed here. What is your main role with the NHL? What's your mandate? What are you trying to do with the grassroots level?
Yeah, great question. So I run like a large fund that was conceived from a previous CBA, not the new one you're seeing, which is collective bargaining agreement, that allows me a chunk of money to help clubs make intentional investments in their market to connect with youth and that next generation. And part of it now is dovetailed into making sure our game is more inclusive, more supportive, more diverse. It's a shame. I'll say this. I think our game still is very pale, male, and stale. I think we need to open up our minds a little bit. I feel very blessed that I had a great team and kind of guided me in forming our first female advisory board to help us solve the problem of how we get more females playing and feeling like they're supported. And we've had some great outcomes from that board. And I'm sharing this with you earlier, Daryl. Like, I never think I have the solutions. There are a lot of smarter people than me around the table. I think sometimes I can discern what problem we're trying to solve. And I think my asset is on finding those people that can help me solve it. So, my win at the end of the year would be if I have more kids playing, not just acquiring them, but more kids staying in hockey, which one could argue that we're losing some kids, and more kids really having fun. Like, I'm just going to give your listeners a 1/10 of a 1/10 make money from this game. A 1/10 of a 1/10. There are 700 jobs at the National Hockey League. The likelihood of your child making it is very unlikely. And I'm not trying to crush dreams, but we got to stop selling making it. We have to stop that. It's a byproduct of your kid enjoying themselves and working hard. But to tell kids, I'm going to get you a D1 scholarship, what are you going to make? Like, really? So I know it's sometimes disruptive, but that's how I feel.
That's disruptive. And I can tell, Lisa, you want to jump in on one of those questions. Jump in, because
It's really interesting, Rob. It's always really nice to hear, something coming out of the NHL that we don't really hear about a lot. So this is a position and kind of a section of the NHL that isn't talked about as much. We always talk about the players, the games, the scores, the whatever's going on in the moment with the game. But we don't always talk around about the background and what's happening with the organization, especially from a community perspective. What is the organization doing in the community when it comes to supporting the game at all levels? And so it's really nice to hear that you've got that position and you're working on it, and the NHL's investing in it, because ultimately and selfishly, if nobody's watching the game, if nobody's playing it, it's going to happen at the top where it's going to fall apart.
Right.
So we need to invest in that grassroots side, and it's nice to hear the NHL doing that. Now, some of the stuff that you mentioned, we've talked about on the podcast, or we sit around and chit chat about it. All the problems that we're dealing with of how to get people involved in this game, how to get people involved in the joy of it, not just the purpose of, like you said, making it, but just the joy of playing. And I think that's where, the sex appeal of making it to the top level. And for a lot of people, it's not just the sex appeal of it. I get to be a hockey player and a superstar, but I get to get out of my circumstance. So I get to go maybe to college for the first time, or I get to go to a new place that I've never been before, or coming from another country. We do some international work. Coming from another country, they get to come over to North America, and it's like, it's a whole lifestyle piece instead of just the I'm going to make it piece. So I have a question for you about how is the NHL measuring their success around this, and I would invite you to go back to, like, where did this start from? Like, what initiated this kind of opportunity? Because I've played hockey my whole life, and hockey thinks that they have everybody. Like, they almost don't need to work hard because, especially here in North America, we're a hockey country. We're hockey countries. We love our hockey. So to work hard at always trying to nurture that growth wasn't always the case when I was young. Now I see, like you talked about, some of the numbers declining. Some of the girls is increasing, which is nice. But how is the NHL working on measuring their success, and where did this start from? Those are two questions I want to throw at you.
Let me take where it started from. I think I want everyone to understand that participation and the experience of participation is everyone's problem. It's everyone's problem. It's not up to an association. It's not only up to the parent. It's not up to the child. It's all our problem. And I think both the NHL and the Players Association felt that we needed to ensure, if people were looking at us to be kind of that North Star, we need to ensure that our message was consistent to the audiences, saying, hey, if you get a bunch of NHLers in a room, they'll tell you, I wanted to play for fun. I ended up being a great player, but my purpose of playing was for the pure enjoyment of playing. So I think we calculated, and realized that our growth was going to come from this next generation, and we had to play a role in youth hockey. The people that lead it are the governing bodies, Hockey Canada and USA Hockey. But with our help, our support, our investment, I would say my investment is one of the largest investments in any youth platform of all the major leagues. And how we measure it is, one is by participation, two is by experience. We do surveys regularly. We hold our clubs accountable. We have, we make sure they're calculated and where they're investing. We put a proportion. We just released an article with Bauer where we are providing a proportion of our Learn to Play program to families that are struggling now through COVID, and parents might have been in some financial strife. So we're being more intentional. We're thinking about, and I'll get to your next question about, more on the measurement piece. But at the end of the day, I want everyone to hear this. Our investment into new audiences, like you described, our investment into diversity is not a philanthropic investment. It's a growth investment. 50% of Torontonians weren't born in Canada. So if we don't learn to connect to broader audiences, and learn to be culturally aware. So when I drive to Markham and I see a community of Asian kids playing hockey and they don't feel accepted by the GTHL or the NHL, we've done something wrong and we need to fix it. What's driven a lot of this passion and desire is the person that owns the Leaf, a wonderful man named Larry Tannenbaum. When you look, we make this assumption that's a false assumption that in Canada, we don't have to work too hard. It's a hockey-ridden country. US is a little different. We can delineate. They have to work very hard, trust me. But the problem in saying that is when we put our guard down, the Raptors come in and they invest in community. So 25 years ago, if anyone said, here, let's put an NBA team in Toronto, the response would have been, are you crazy? This is a Leaf nation. One could argue it's a Raptor nation right now, even though you guys are wearing your hats. But my point in saying that is, if you really want to see theories of change, go watch a Raptor game or go watch it on TV. That's Toronto. People in the stands, that's Toronto. Go watch a Leaf game. And although I think we're progressing, we're still not there yet. We're still not capturing the essence of diversity. And that's a complete measurement. And that's my litmus test is I know what the Raptors did. I know how they invested in community. We have little control over the product they get or the players they get, but we know they were intentional on their outreach. And hockey's got to do the same thing. We can't get arrogant and think that if we don't make these concerted investments and show people that we care and that there's a space, a safe place for their kids to play, we're going to move backwards rapidly.
Yeah, no, great points. And I like the comparison with basketball and hockey. And if you look, like I remember going down and playing, I lived near Christie Pitts, and I'd go down to Christie Pitts and there'd be the ball courts there and guys would be playing street ball, and then there'd be the arena, and you'd be able to go out there and you'd play ball hockey in the summer and ice hockey in the winter. And you see the difference on the courts and on the arena of the people who are playing. Basketball, it almost is, because it's more affordable to play, and the resources, it was started with a peach basket, so you didn't need fancy equipment, you didn't need cold weather. You could play it, and you can play it all over the world in different ways. Hockey, the accessibility to hockey, it's always gone to a different group. And some interesting stuff's happening now with the discussion around diversity and inclusion when it comes to race and culture, women playing. And I think a lot of it comes back to, can you see yourself in those places? Do you have someone to look up to? And for so long, everyone you had to look up to in hockey was, as you said, pale and male. And so,
yes.
So now, not necessarily stale. They're pretty exciting, but yeah, you look through the echelons, you go through the Hockey Hall of Fame. There's a lot of pale male faces in there. Now you're starting to see much more diversity come out, and I'm hoping that that's going to help pull people and say, you know what, I can belong here. And I think in basketball, that was bred into the game from the beginning, and it's been supported by the multiculturalism in Toronto. Definitely, it's great to see. We are the North, and you see everybody outside watching the games, and now winning a championship, helps get people on board as well.
Of course, yeah.
But it's, if you look, it's good to hear. You're looking at the different examples, what other community or what other sports are doing. Like you said, they're investing in community. How does hockey do the same thing?
That's awesome. So, I'm going to change gears a little bit. Let's talk about the present landscape of youth hockey. I want Rob, just your opinion. I want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's really good, and what's ugly, and just from your point of view, because I know what the viewers think is ugly and what's good, but I just I know you're out there. Can you give me a little insight on what's really good and what's not so good in youth hockey right now?
So I'll start with the good. I think it's the greatest, with bias. I think it's the greatest game in the world. You wrote a great article about how hockey saved your life last week, Daryl.
100% it did.
I think it teaches you so many skill sets as a child you won't appreciate or comprehend, but as an adult, every time I'm in a room and I'm in a boardroom and I look around, I'm like, hockey got me here. The disciplines, the challenges, the resilience, the coaching I didn't always like, but I listened to, respect, how to play as a team. I really believe that it's the greatest game on the planet for health reasons, for a whole host of things and challenges, and the application to what's next, to just everyday life. That's what I see as good. And I do believe that there are great people in our game that I find on a regular basis that are open to change. Some of these problems we're currently having are based in ignorance, right? And we just need to help educate these people. The downside, and this is probably more personal, and I've been impacted because I feel I was one of the, and I hate blaming parents, but the downside is there are times we treat our kids like an RRSP or a 401k on the US side. And we look at a certain age and we say, am I getting a return? Is the return positive, or is it, because we say things, and I fell into this trap myself, and I quickly realized how to change it. But we say things like, hey, if you don't want to do this anymore, I'm spending this much money. Like we could spend the money elsewhere. Like we take an adult mindset and our psychological problems and apply them on a 12-year-old mind. And I'm like, well, what are we doing? And I don't think we'd accept behavior like this in the education system or anywhere else, mind you. But we treat our kids like making it is everything. And I worry sometimes because, you know, we've talked about this, the drop off at like 12 and 13, where kids are coming into their own. If hockey is their identity and they feel like they're failing, they're going to want to escape, right? If you're telling me I had to be some PK Subban scored this many goals at 13 and I don't have a third as many, I'm a failure. It's asinine. So it's the story that we tell our kids. This game should be all about recreation. The great ones will find their way out. The great ones will get picked up and move. But we should be playing this game forever. It's a great game. And we should be aiming to get to the beer league because we all go there or somehow end up there. So my point is, like, parents, just watch how you're treating your kids. I was guilty. I wasn't great. I'd be asking my child, how do you think you played? And that was the precursor to you played crap. You know, like when I had to ask him that, because I was the first one to jump on his bandwagon when he played well. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, really, what am I doing? Why am I trying to kill his emotional tank? And so the downside is what, Daryl, we talk about this, the economics, and Lisa, you mentioned this. I don't think kids that, when we say things like basketball require a ball or baseball ball and a glove, well, we need to do better. Even when you think about basketball, when kids start basketball, they usually start a pickup game of 3-on-3, and everyone appreciates that's basketball. What I don't think we've done a great job with in hockey, if kids picked up a stick and just played ball hockey like Daryl and I did when we were 7, we started accepting that we appreciate all forms of hockey. Who cares? If you want to be a ball hockey player, if you want to be a field hockey player, if you want to be, and you never want to see ice, you're still a hockey player. But I think what we did before is we were very myopic and said, the only way you could be a hockey player is if it's on ice. And we just lost everyone. So if you want entries, if you want low cost, low commitment, let's create great ball hockey opportunities. Let's make sure it's in phys ed classes in schools. Let's make sure we make good investments in communities where kids could play. And it doesn't always have to be on ice, and we don't have to rely on the cold of the frigid Toronto winters, you know.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, but when we were kids, do you remember in our little community, they bought a net for us?
They bought us nets, 2 nets.
2 nets. So I think they bought us nets so we wouldn't keep slamming the ball against the little squares there, but they bought us 2 nets. I will never forget that investment, because that was huge. And you just said it. You know, I think you're on to the parents. I want to add the coaches. The coaches they have a huge responsibility, and we always talk about this quality coaching on our podcast. The coaches also have to have that voice that you're talking about, where it's about development and fun as opposed to wins. Because that winning thing is a big issue, because
Yeah.
If you're not winning, you want to drop out. And
Yeah.
then winning also translates to the sportsapreneurs, the hockey, the skating coaches, and the shooting coaches that say, you want to win? Come with me. So
And then as soon as you pay them, they feel as though winning has to be their only measurement, right?
Exactly.
Like, how many times do we do surveys to see the well-being of a child? How many times do we ask kids what they want? You know, and I just find I this is something humorous. I worked with some coaches to help develop them. They asked me to come in and work with a few coaches a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but I want you and I want your listeners to take note of this. Watch a coach change their tone like they're macho men when they're talking to kids. It's this new voice. It's like they need to be like a Hulk, like, hey guys. And I'm like, where's the voice coming from? Like, why do we need to be so aggressive?
I know what you're talking about. They got, it's like they turn into Superman.
Like gladiators, like, and they're tense and their voice changes and I'm just like, what is that? Like, well, this becomes an act. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. You know.
You had one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to go back to kind of what you were saying, Rob, about all the forms of hockey. So coming out to BC, so growing up in Toronto, I was the the kind of the way that you talked about what we think about now. I wanted ice hockey. I wanted ice. I wanted to skate. Everything else, yeah, I'd play ball hockey in the summer and that was fine. But it was really just training for ice hockey. Like that's all I cared about. And I think a lot of the reason was because that was what you saw. There's no national ball hockey league that's the same level as the NHL. When I came out to BC, I live here now, ice hockey is not as prevalent for a lot of reasons. I think one, they don't have the cold winter, so they don't have free outdoor ice all winter long. So what's more prevalent down here is ball hockey and roller hockey.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with someone yesterday about roller hockey, and I hadn't even, roller hockey to me wasn't anything. It was all about ice hockey and that's it. And I come out here and I realized roller hockey was a huge part of kids growing up, kids' opportunity to engage in the game of hockey and travel down in the States because it's huge in the States as well. In Ontario, I didn't even hear about it. I didn't even know about roller hockey. And anyone now that I still play in those lovely beer leagues you talk about, and I play with a lot of guys that have sick hands, just ridiculous hands. And you talk to them about how they developed in roller or ball hockey and then got these ridiculous hands, learned how to skate, put them together. So that connecting of the different forms of hockey is a really important thing I think we don't talk about either, is how working on your hands in roller and ball hockey is going to help in ice hockey, and then vice versa. You work on your speed in ice hockey and your cutting, it helps over in ball hockey and roller, and it gives that athlete now, that person, more skills, more opportunity to go to different places, and more friends that they're going to have in different places. So I really like what you said about the different forms of hockey, and I think we don't talk about that enough, and we don't really realize. Again, I go back to what we see is what we know. We know the NHL, so seeing it and highlighting those things. And you talked about kind of like the progressive model. So we talked about small ice hockey for kids, the short side, cutting the numbers down. And I know there's a lot of parents, I talk to them, and they really don't like that. They really fight against it. They go, this isn't real hockey. And then I come out here with my diagrams about the development, actually they get more touches on the puck and it's better for their development, and they don't care. And Kids Sports put out some videos about this showing the benefit of having progressive opportunities for them to play the game. But we don't do a good enough job selling that to them as valuable. And I think, like you said, and you said, Daryl, too, we value the W's. We value the cup, we value the W's, and that's it. And we have to do a good job. And I really believe coming from essentially the horse's mouth, the NHL, it's going to trickle downstream. And then going against some of the voices that are challenging that notion, like the sport entrepreneurs, those are always chirping in my mind. Here in BC, it's amazing how much money some families are paying to get their kids in year-round hockey and year-round development things, and then the kids burn out and drop out when they're in their teens. And we know this cycle exists, but it's almost swept under the rug.
Yeah.
So being able to talk about, one, the problem, and two, the solutions to some of those problems and challenging them with a positive and realistic opportunity, like you're saying, is where we need to progress the game to. So
well, just to that point, and I think it's well surmised there is, I think at the end of the day, many things COVID is kind of maybe crazy, but one thing that's good is hockey excels when it's community-based hockey, when you can kind of play for the appeal of playing. Because then if I keep things in my community, then I play multiple sports, which are important. Like I know Daryl is a big fan of, like, we should be trying hockey, we should be trying soccer, we should be trying baseball, we should be trying all the other sports. Because if I can tell you, and I believe in this wholeheartedly, to be a true hockey ambassador comes in kind of a mantra of, we first build the citizen. How do you build good people, right? Then you build the athlete, and the only way you do that is by exposing them to a variety of different movements, which are different sports, and then you build the hockey player. They then pick from there. So the triad is great citizens. Like, let's have great ambassadors in our game, great people. Then let's have great athletes in our game that play a myriad of sports. And then let's pick those at a certain age, maybe 16, 15, that gonna kind of branch out, that do have that experience that, hey, this child might have a chance. But to have those conversations at like 10 years of age, I can tell you in my neighborhood, the number of people that come up and go, hey man, my kid is on fire. He's scoring all these goals and you should see his edges and this. And I go, how old is he? 7. I'm like, go get a Tim Hortons and relax, man, because this is, you know how many things change.
This is exactly what I'm seeing, and again, it's a tough time, going back to the winning thing, Rob. People and the parent thing that you talked about, parents are living through their kids. It's an ego thing. And we talked about it on a podcast a little while back. It's all about the parents' ego, and they're trying to get their kid to maybe do something they wish they could have done in their life or accomplished, but didn't. And they're like, okay, I know what I did wrong. I'm going to make sure my kid doesn't do it that way, and he gets somewhere. So I'm seeing a lot of that, and that kind of leads, because you're just sort of talking about it, Rob. What strategies are working growing the game? And, second part is who's doing it well? Is it the States or the US or Europe? What strategies are working growing the game?
So what we have found is a couple things. First of all, it's not always starting, as I mentioned, like on ice. So we have this kind of fluid model of, it's physical literacy. Let's catch them where they're at, which is in school. So bear with me for a sec. We have a program, a STEM education program, to allow kids to be exposed to our game and learn STEM concepts virtually. So let's get some engagement in schools. Give a product, Daryl, you were a teacher, give a product to a teacher that they can teach math and science, but allow kids maybe to potentially be interested in your game. So we start in school just with the knowledge base. If they are then interested, we start with the physical literacy and in maybe injecting them in ball hockey in schools through phys ed, or maybe even an outside boys and girls club. Then we see that myriad. What we see works best is when people have different entry points. So you can have low cost, low commitment entry points. You can have ball hockey points. You can have kids that might want to just be gamers. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is build fandom. One of the tactics in building fandom is ensuring that you get people connected and playing ice hockey. That's one tactic. But you could build fandom from connecting people to playing virtually. Like, look at e-gaming. Like, it's growing. And I know it's not physical activity, but when we're talking about connection, they are very connected to an audience that we don't have yet, but we're trying to accelerate. So I think our investments in ice hockey being important, but all these other elements and making sure that the ecosystem has a point of entry for everyone is essential. And everyone meaning those that are beginning, those that are more improved or advanced. So that's what I see is kind of working. Countries that seem to do it the best, and we always hear about them, is is like the European countries that really, like when you talk about Norway, their government is built into physical literacy. Like I think you get credits for kids being active, and their schools take this responsibility on. Like children have to participate in some kind of physical forum, right? For movement. And they don't keep the wins and losses. Like I know people think that's comical. They don't. And then a parent will argue with me and say, well, the kids keep it in their head. Yeah, but we don't remind them of it by a big block scoreboard sitting in the middle of the ice. Like maybe they do. But at the end of the day, I think these countries are fostering, punching well above their weight. They're fostering great experiences. People are lifelong players, and they're getting far more of these elite athletes from a model where they just get them moving, get them loving it, not keeping score, developing them how they're meant to, and ultimately, you know, staying in the game in some capacity.
Way long. You want?
Well, can I ask,
Elise, go ahead.
yeah, can I ask you a question about, you talk about the people who are doing it well, and that's, definitely the Scandinavian countries, they seem like they're fostering a lifestyle of activity, and that includes hockey, and it includes, winter sports, it includes summer sports, it includes that kind of lifestyle year round in the model that we wanted to see, like that multi-sport level and true development stage. And now going on the other side, what are some of the conversations you have with whether it's an LSO or a PSO or an NSO about why they're not making this shift? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people you've talked to that, whether it's a sport entrepreneur or a nonprofit or whomever, that are saying, no, we're good. We're going to keep doing things how we've always done. And they're not really on board with this, especially when it comes to sharing athletes or to turning the season back from now what it is, a year-round season, to actually having a hockey season and then letting them go play another sport. What's some of the pushback you're hearing, and how are you guys handling that?
Yeah, that's a good one. First of all, we need to find common frame of reference with the governing bodies. We kind of injected ourselves. We have a different relationship with USA Hockey versus Hockey Canada, albeit very good on both sides. I have lots of history with Hockey Canada and building a strong relationship with USA Hockey. I think the mandate in Hockey Canada is certainly to produce strong athletes, and their business model is to produce World Junior Games and Olympic Games, and they run it like a business. And I can say they kind of answer to the provincial bodies, right? So there are some of the parts, and I think sometimes the trap is people always saw Hockey Canada as the insurance policy. So sign up with us, we'll do governance. Hockey Canada has a plethora of information that I'm not sure people kind of pull from. And, it's challenging, because I do think you get to this point of, are you just trying to protect your own island? Or are you actually listening to the consumer around what they want? So we're now seeing all these Maverick leagues that are going on and setting up shop and doing their own thing because they're unhappy with the world that's been provided by our governing bodies. And I kind of sit in the middle. Like, I kind of think Hockey Canada has a chance, and will have a chance to embrace these people. Like, this is the consumer telling you, we're not happy playing 12, 20 hours a week. Like, why can't we have 2 games and 2 practices at the same times at the same arena and not make it so crazy? I don't know who's willing. I know there's great leadership at Hockey Canada. I just don't know who's willing to make that change. Because every time we seem like we're on that precipice of some big change, it kind of gets halted for whatever reason. So maybe it's micro changes. Maybe, I know they had a hard time with, as to your point earlier, like the small-sided games. That was like a beep show, that was like, and I'm like, oh my God, the science supported this. And then it just,
yeah.
And I said to them, it's the dissemination of the information. It's how we went about it. But my challenge, it's a tough question for me, because I know there are lots of good people doing great work at both USA Hockey and Hockey Canada. I think they're very open-minded to these new ideas and to change hockey. I think where people fall short is they don't know the how. They don't know how to get there, right? And it's we're pushing them. Trust me, we're pushing them.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate it. And I know it's a tough question, and there's no real answer to make that kind of wide sweeping change. You know, we've talked about on the podcast, and that's what a lot of us do, is we're in the business in some form, whether it's sport, physical literacy, multi-sport, whatever your passion project is, we're in some form of trying to shift on a huge scale a big social problem, like whatever it is, whether it's just general physical activity and increasing that, whether it's nutrition or education or diversity. Like there's these big challenging problems that we're addressing, and in hockey there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And you know, when we look at, and Daryl and I were talking about this yesterday, like who's regulating this and who's in charge of this, of making sure this happens and this doesn't happen. And right now it's, you know, sports in a lot of ways is the Wild West. Everybody kind of does what they want. You know, they're in line with their NSOs, their PSOs, and their LNOs to some degree, but who's really regulating? And we saw this in the last couple of years with the safe sport movement. Obviously, some really terrible things have been happening in some sports, and now there's a little more, it seems like, that overseeing regulation. And I'm not saying that that's the solution necessarily. I think you mentioned it, like those micro changes are really important, and getting the buy-in from both levels. To have the parents support the change you're trying to go for and not push against it, and to have the high-level people in those positions supporting that change and then making that sandwich so that hopefully it flows all the way through. And I mean, you guys can't do it alone. You got to reach out to people around and hopefully find those champions who are going to keep it going. And that was, you know, was my next question, is who are you working with on this? Who's helping you guys do this? Because you can't do it alone.
It's another great question. We work with, so I think the NHL has influence and credibility, right? That we can help amplify. We don't have the bandwidth or the human capital to go in and make all this change. So we work very closely with our governing bodies to try and excel. We share strategies. We find common frames of reference. But to be honest with you, we are willing to listen to associations. We're willing to, Daryl was part of, I invited him to a panel where we really influenced the GTHL, the Greater Toronto Hockey League, the biggest league in the world, by the way, to do a culture and inclusion session rather than do like an updated hockey, to shift their mindset to say, hey, do you really think people need an updated hockey? Like we can do that through a Google search. What about like a culture and inclusion? How are we going to change the way our game looks and be more appealing and inviting to all audiences, especially in Toronto, right? And that was just the kind of template that hopefully we can take to Vancouver, we can take to the US, we could take elsewhere. If you could do it with the biggest, can you do it, you know, more broadly? So yeah, we work generally, you know, we try and go a little bit more local. We get a lot of reach out. At U of T just reached out to me to see if we can do something with their students in diversity that love the game. So we find ways to, you know, to reach out to, we can't reach out to everyone. There are lots of problems to solve and many, but again, I come back to my premise prior. This is everyone's problem. And Hockey Canada right now has they're opening up their board of directorship. Like you can apply to be a board member. Don't complain on the sidelines. If you want to invoke change, be involved.
I should apply.
Yeah, D-Man, that's got you written all over it.
Why wouldn't you?
No, you're right. I should.
But I hear these parents in my ear all the time. This got to change. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? I know what I'm doing about it. What are you doing about it? So, yeah, I think we have to change kind of the national framework a little bit of we got to change the agenda around how hockey is seen, viewed, and played. And that takes a little bit of time. I had the privilege of being asked to be on Hockey Canada's diversity and inclusion task force to figure out how we make our game more appealing and inviting to broader audiences. That's just started. USA Hockey has a similar board. So yeah, it's figuring out what problem you're trying to tackle first. There are some that are kind of a parallel strategy, but the biggest one for me, I would say, if I in 5 years can say this journey's been a win, our game would look different from a participation point of view. The trend would be up and there'd be more diverse kids playing, and gender as well. There would be more girls, there'd be more diversity on all spectrums. And our game wouldn't be so focused anymore on the elitism. Our game wouldn't be spending 90% of our time on that pyramid that we talk about, like where the 10th of a 10th get all the attention. We actually now have converted back to community hockey, People care again. People are putting their hands up to volunteer, and hockey's just made it a great environment to enjoy your childhood and your adulthood.
I love it. It's a good 5-year dream, man. Question, and I got you on here. If I didn't ask you about this in your experience, I kick myself. I grew up with you, Rob. I experienced some racism growing up as a kid playing hockey. Tell me about your experience, and I know you had some. Your mom's Jamaican, and I know you went through some stuff, maybe a little differently than me. But how did you handle it? And give us a situation that you know if you can share some light on some of the racism. And right now, I'm really impressed with the NHL and how they're handling the Black Lives Matter in this whole playoffs thing. So just as a side note, and I think they've done an amazing job. That just as good as the NBA, I think, at putting it out there and saying we're not going to stand for this anymore. So I just it's not really a question. I just want you to share, you know, where you might have felt racism, where you were involved and you had to deal with it.
You know, it's interesting. Under the great leadership of Kim Davis, and I work very closely with Kim. When I was younger, I might have been ignorant, and as a 50-year-old now, I look back and I go, that was the intersection of racism. And you know, I felt many times where, you know, my mom would bring me to a game. You know, we'd take the bus to our hockey games, and you know, as they're walking her in, they're looking for my parent, and I'd point to my mom, saying, "That's my mom," and there would be like this disbelief, you know, like that can't be your mom. Right. And you kind of struggle with your own identity, because you're like, well, what is going on? And then you'd look up in the stands and there'd be one black woman by herself, and you would hear stupid stuff that just said, like, you know, and I say this not to pump you were my mentor. Like, you're a couple years older than me. Man. No, but I looked up to you. I let my son train with you because of the positive influence you've had on me and him. But I watched, I mean, you and I know some circumstances where people were blatantly racist when we grew up, and we were on a golf course one time, and there's but I mean, I think as an adult, I look back and say, man, was I given, and I ask myself this all the time, was I given some opportunities that you or your brother weren't, because people see me as white, right? And I truly, as a 50-year-old, I'm exploring this. And, I hope not, but I'd be lying to say that maybe I was, you know, and maybe, who knows? But listen, I love the way this was said to me. If racism happens in society and the GTHL or hockey is played in society, then racism exists in hockey. It just does. And I think there is something that I'm learning about the unconscious bias. It's sometimes the way we say things and the joking. Like, you know, I heard a lady one time refer to my friend's son like, wow, the black guys are just better athletes. Look at the way that black guy is skating. Like, I'm like, what about just, he's a great athlete and he's skating really well. Like, why the connection to the black? And I just didn't.
You know.
Yeah, I was looking at her going, are you really saying this out loud? Is this your outer voice? But I do give us lots of, I don't want to say credit. I give us props for listening and trying to solve these problems of racism. We had several discussions with HDA, which is Hockey Diversity Alliance, led by Evander Kane and Akeem Alou, and I've been on a few of those calls. So our eyes are open. We're really, I would be, if I left my job in the next 5 years and we haven't changed the lens of hockey, I would be really upset. And I think it's going to take lots of work. I think it's going to take cultural competencies. Like when I go to Markham and I see a group of young Asian kids that don't believe like the NHL wants them. Let me give you one example. I'll do this in 2 minutes. Haley Wickenheiser is a friend of mine, and we supported her. It's called Wickfest. It's a girls' tournament. And this young girl pulled on my sleeve and she goes, "You're with the NHL?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Why would the NHL want to support a girls' hockey tournament?" And I just was dumbfounded. I'm like,
said, why? Wow.
Yeah, like younger. And I'm just like, because you're an important part of our game. Like, that's why I flew out to Calgary to be here. And the Prime Minister was there as well, ironically. And I was just like, because you're an important part. And what people feel, 40% of our viewership is female.
Wow.
Like 40% of our fans are female. Yet I'm not sure we do a great job at kind of lending support, being culturally competently aware, and speaking a language that all can embrace, but I think we're getting there. I don't want to kind of let you deem that we've got lots to learn, but we're trying to execute.
Very good. Elise, you want to add before we go on to first steps?
Yeah, no, definitely. We're getting into some of that territory where it's like this is a problem in a lot of spheres, racism and trying to include people who don't feel included in whether it's an area or a sport or an environment. How do we do that in a real intentional way, from both an organizational level as well as an individual level? And then you talked about like that unconscious bias that you might have, or some of those little micro racist things that happen, and if nobody says anything about it, they just continue to permeate and grow and be accepted. And so I play hockey with a group of drop-in guys, and a lot of them are the typical, they played junior growing up, and now they're playing beer league. Didn't make it to where we really talked about. They didn't make it to the show, but they still love the game and they're still playing. But there's these little comments that are always thrown out in the dressing room or on the bench, and there's a balance between having fun and making fun and kind of joking with each other and it being okay, and that switch over to, this is too far, like you can't say those things. And as a girl on the bench, I get them too, and I have to take it and I have to give it. Like you're in that environment, you're going to have a little bit of it. So I think on one side, we can't be so sensitive that we think we're going to get rid of that joking, where we are different and we need to acknowledge differences in a playful way. Sometimes, like you talked about, the black athletes are just better with being athletic, and Daryl kind of smiles. He's like, yeah, we are.
Yeah.
there's a joking to it.
Yeah.
As long as it's coming from a safe place and from a positive perspective, versus, we've seen people throw banana peels onto the ice, or the indigenous kids come out and they're just scorched with racism and they never want to play the game again.
Right.
And I don't know, sometimes when I'm sitting on the bench, there's a particular guy, and he says the most racist things as a joking way and doesn't think he's racist.
Yeah.
And thinks this is an environment where he can say it. And I'm always caught between, how do I manage this so I don't come across as, the law-abiding citizen who I'm not allowing any fun, but I'm also not accepting and not allowing this to happen when he's saying something and there's a 16-year-old kid who's coming out to play with us and he's hearing this going, oh, okay, this is how we talk. Okay. So I'm trying to find that balance on an individual level. And then from an organizational level, maybe there's some resources I'll point him to with the HDA. I know definitely watching the games and seeing We Skate for Black Lives Matter, seeing those things are helping. And we have a long way to go for sure, but it's good to know it's starting. The conversations are starting. They're getting bigger. We're seeing the players kneel. It's, and it's very controversial. It's still very controversial, but controversial helps us get forward, I think, where we need to go, as long as there's open ears to listen to it, and there's a desire to change. So it sounds like, we've talked about a lot of things, and we could talk, I'm sure, about a lot more things.
We could talk forever today about this.
But I think you did a great job at, like, my only kind of encouraging words to you is, anytime you're unsure, seek clarity, be courageous. Like, and I wish I was more of that in my 40s and my 50s. I'm being like that, but in my 40s, I was probably like you, kind of wondering. And I think anytime we have those moments of wonder, you're either going to provide some education to someone that, and I'm certain, I believe in humanity. I do believe that there are intentional racists. I see it on TV. And then I believe that people are ignorant, like those comments that that guy is saying. And if you have to think at any point, what does he mean? They're hurtful in some regard. Like if you're at that balance point of, I'm not sure where this lives, And I agree with you. Banter is going to exist. Cultural banter is going to exist. But we sometimes need to just make sure, especially people that we're teammates with, sometimes you cross the line and it becomes a bit hurtful. And if you have to think about it, I encourage you to just have that kind of, we call it corporate courage, but it could be sport courage too. In a quiet moment, just say, I'm not sure where this is coming from, and it might be an unconscious bias, but it's impacting people.
Yeah, I'm gonna start hitting them on the head a little bit more, I think.
Can't be silent.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap it up. Rob, we usually end with what we call first steps. So it's kind of like 3 things that you want people to walk away with from today. If they just 3 things that you make sure you got these 3 things.
Yeah.
We'll start with you. What 3 things do you think people should walk away from this?
So the first thing I would say, this is a journey where a parent and a child can have great fond memories, and that's what your intent should be. How can I get closer to my child? They will have ups, they will have downs, no different than a parent's job. So this is a journey in your child's development, not in your child making it or not, right? So how do we create stronger connections? The second thing I want people to take away, and it just came into the discussion and the last part, is I want people to have courage. I want people to have courage for change. I want people to have courage to have the discussion. I want people to be willing to have the uncomfortable discussion with their coaches, with their parents, with their kids.
Teammates, yeah.
Teammates, it's the only way our game is going to change and grow. And the third thing I would say that I think is very important is we all have to move away from hockey as only one thing. Hockey is a variety of things. And the example, a lot of Pakistani and Hindu culture are so familiar with ball hockey. So they have the dexterity of a hockey stick. They're probably better than we are. Think about an easy transition. If we knew how to invite them into a ball hockey game after knowing they play field hockey, that's an opportunity. And really what I want people to understand is, let's appreciate and applaud all forms of it. And investing in all forms of hockey in different people is not philanthropy. It's an investment for our future. It's growth. So I don't want people thinking, why are we spending all this time and worrying about Black communities and brown communities and Asian communities? No, this is the way our game is going to have a long, sustainable future.
Love it. Love it. E, what you got?
Very nice. Very nice. Well, this is, it's really nice to hear, especially we've had over the years lots of different acknowledgments around, what's the reality. It's gone from the concussion debate to safer sport when it comes to abuse that we're seeing. And now we're talking about diversity and racism, and then just the elitism of sport as well. Like we've talked about a lot of these issues. I think the acknowledgement of what our true environment is the first step that we need to really look at. Is what are we dealing with? Because a lot of times we kind of close our mind off to it and say that's not a hockey problem, that doesn't exist here, we don't have a problem with that. We do, and we need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge that we're part of the solution. We're not the solution entirely necessarily. We're definitely a part of it, which also means we're part of the problem. So we need to acknowledge that. We touched a little bit on the multi-sport appeal. So there's multi-sport within hockey. There's also multi-sport we need to grow as part of hockey. So what are you doing in off season? Like right now with rinks closed in a lot of places, what are you doing that's going to help grow you as an athlete in other areas, and also have crossover skills that you can inject into hockey when you come back? So I think we need to really highlight that. It's everybody's kind of lost without playing hockey. Okay, grab something else, grab a tennis racket, soccer ball, something else, go out and play, and you'll be a better hockey player. And we have lots of examples in the NHL of multi-sport athletes. And then my last one is we need to demand more of ourselves and our game. And I say that from both an individual level and an organizational level and a community level. So we're usually just so happy to put on a Leafs cap and get out there and support our team. But we also need to demand more, and of ourselves as parents, of ourselves as athletes, of ourselves as organizations. How can we be better? And I say that not thinking that we're all bad and there's nothing good happening. There are good things happening. There are good people in the game. How can we be better tomorrow from where we are today? And if we're not trying to improve, we're maintaining or we're failing. So always try and demand more.
Oh man, you went deep there. That was good. I'm not so deep. First thing I want to do to help with growing the game, youth hockey, is I think we got to get rid of the word elite, and we got to focus on development and participation. If you're listening, that is something. No kid is elite. You know, I hate to say it. That would be my first thing. Number two, we need to educate parents and coaches on how to bring these kids up in a development and fun environment, like Rob provided in his camps. Like my kids, they go to all these elite hockey camps apparently, but the camp they always wanted to go back to was Rob's camp because it was fun. And they got better too. So the parents, that's the education. They need to know, like, what's this pathway look like? Well, it's the pathway to the beer league. That's the pathway that they should be focused on. And that's how your kid's going to play as long as possible in the best environment possible, as many as we'll get more kids doing that. And the last thing I want to say that I take away from today is, if we know better, we should do better. And we know this whole thing about now with, you know, it's that time where you have to watch what you say. You have to be aware of yourself now. You can't just say whatever you want. Like we got to focus on humans, being human, not color, whatever. Being human. What's the human thing to do? How do you want to be treated? And that's the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And if we did that in sport, in life, we'd be fine. My kindergarten teacher taught me that, right? And I'm still listening to it.
Yeah.
So guys, Robbie K, thank you for being here today. Elise, you were awesome. Robbie K, buddy, you're too modest. You gave the modest version today. Okay, I know you got to keep it down for the audience.
Yeah.
Listen, look this guy up. He's doing great things in the hockey world. He's making things happen. If you like this episode, please share this with your friends. Share this with parents, hockey organizations. This youth hockey is a big thing. It's a big thing. Everyone's always talking about it. Good, bad, or ugly, they're always talking about hockey. They use that as a big example in lots of youth sports. So thanks for coming out, guys. And you know how we do it. Just go play.